Welcome everyone to our Packers News post-game live chat here at Lambeau Field alongside Ryan Wood. I am Olivia Reiner. The Packers are now 2-0 this season after they defeated the Detroit Lions 42-21. We'll bring you the latest on Aaron Jones' career day, a stellar performance from Aaron Rodgers, and much more in just a moment. However, as always, before we begin, I want to remind you can be a part of our conversation. If you're over on Facebook, leave us a question. Leave us a thought. Ryan and I will get to some of those toward the end of our conversation today. The Detroit Lions' plan coming into today's game was to take wide receiver Davante Adams out of the offense, and they were successful in doing that. However, that let Aaron Jones have a career day both on the ground and through the air. He had 236 all-purpose yards, 3 touchdowns, better day than he had his career best back against Kansas City in 2019. Ryan, why wasn't the Lions defense able to find an answer for Aaron Jones?
Because it's a pick-your-poison offense now. You've got 2 elite playmakers in this offense, and they're very, very different roles. You got a guy outside, Davante Adams, who can go get 17 targets, 14 catches, have the day he did in Week 1 against the Vikings. You take him away, double-team him constantly, 3 targets, 3 catches, fine, but you can't do that and load the box against Aaron Jones. So which one are you going to pick? And today, as you said, it was clear. They didn't load the box nearly as much. Just look at that 75-yard touchdown run to start the third quarter. I mean, the Red Sea parted. I mean, I asked Aaron Jones, when did you know that was going to the house? And he said basically as soon as he saw where the safeties were, he knew. I mean, they weren't going to touch him. They weren't going to catch him. 75 yards basically untouched. It's pick your poison, and then on top of that, it is a triplets because you still have a guy named Aaron Rodgers who is ruthlessly efficient and really playing at the top of his game through 2 weeks. This offense has got that kind of 2014 feel. It's clearly better than what they were last week. You know, Olivia, the stat that jumps out to me, through 2 games last year, the first 2 games with Matt LaFleur, 17 punts for J.K. Scott. Through 2 games this year, 3. 17-3. That's how good this offense has been.
The Packers managed to generate a lot of those explosive plays, including that 75-yard run from Aaron Jones. He also had a 30-yard reception. Marquez Valdes-Scantling also had a 41-yard reception. Why were the Packers able to generate so many explosive plays, not only in today's game, but also in last week's game?
You know what they'll tell you is the offensive line. And that 41-yarder from Marquez Valdes-Scantling, you asked Aaron Jones about it afterward, the pass pro that Aaron Jones had. You know, he had that ridiculous 30-yard catch over a cornerback that not a lot of running backs in this league can do. He had the 75-yard touchdown. It's going to be easy to overlook giving your quarterback time to find a guy to take a deep shot, but that's what he did with standing up the linebacker in the hole, the blitzing linebacker, and I mean, his pass pro has come a long way. So you're talking about a complete running back now. He's not just a playmaker. He's always been dynamic. He's a complete playmaker. And then Marquez Valdes-Scantling, another game, 2 games now, another 40-yard completion. That's what he does so well. When MVS was at the top of his game, when he was playing the way with confidence and swagger, the way that he can with that 4.3 40, with that 6'5" height, he was a 40-yard machine. Early in his career, it was about a third of his games to start in his first season, he had a 40-yard catch. He's back 2 for 2 this year. He looks a lot more confident than he did, and he's a secondary weapon. You know, you've got your Davante Adams and Aaron Jones. MVS coming on the way he is, he's another weapon in this offense that really gives them more depth than maybe you thought they'd have going into the season.
After today's game, quarterback Aaron Rodgers was asked about what makes this offense so much more efficient than offenses in the past, what separates it even from that 2014 team, and he says it's the running backs tandem in both Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams. Williams very quietly had 8 carries for 63 yards today. Ryan, why is Williams' role so important to this offense, even as a secondary back?
Yeah, because he does so many things well. He's not the quick twitch, dynamic burst of a playmaker that Aaron Jones is. He's a really good pass blocker. You know, a couple times today when the Packers were backed up, it was Jamal Williams on the field for the pass blocking. He's a natural receiver, and he's a different look. He's a between the tackles guy that is just different than Aaron Jones. He can throw multiple looks at a defense in the run game. And it's kind of what I wrote about today was, you know, this should feel kind of like deja vu for Aaron Rodgers. They've been here before. Late 2016, 2014, 2011. They've done this. They've made it look easy as an offense with Aaron Rodgers before. And yet, when he was asked today, does this feel familiar? He said, no, not really, because schematically it's so different. They're going about it so differently than they have in the past with that run game, with the pre-snap motions. Look at how many receivers are wide open. There's a reason why he's getting rid of the ball so fast, because of how wide open his receivers are. The script is different, but the final destination is the same. They're dropping 40 points 2 weeks. It's what they've done before, but they're doing it differently.
Aaron Rodgers is following last week's stellar performance against the Minnesota Vikings with yet another one. Today, he had 18 completions for 240 yards and 2 touchdowns. He now has over 600 passing yards and 6 touchdowns. Ryan, how much more comfortable does Rodgers look in this offense, his second game under head coach Matt LaFleur in year 2?
Night and day. His passer rating through 2 games this year, 119, through 2 games last year was 96. So he's got about a 25-point higher passer rating. It should be said that the Lions were – Darius Slay was shipped out of the division. He's not here anymore in Detroit. Desmond Trufant didn't play today because of the hamstring. Jeff Okudah is getting his first start. Last week you had Holton Hill, undrafted 3 years ago out of Lamar, against Devontae Adams. So there is a good reason why it's looked easy, because they haven't gone against the Chicago Bears yet. They haven't gone against – I know they had injuries today. They haven't gone against a defense like the San Francisco 49ers last year yet. They haven't gone against top defenses. But this is what a really good offense should do against bad defenses. They should make bad defenses look really bad, and that's what they've done through 2 games. It's been easy for this offense. So, it's something where Aaron Rodgers, I think, he looks MVP form. If he can do this over 14 more games, that's the type of level he's playing at right now.
Let's move on to the Packers' defense's performance. They struggled a little bit early, allowing 14 points from the Detroit Lions. However, later on in the game, Packers outside linebacker Rashawn Gary helped shift the momentum for the Packers. He put up a sack and a half. He had 2 quarterback hits, 4 tackles. Ryan, how much different does this Rashawn Gary look from last year's Rashawn Gary?
It's funny, and this isn't the first time it's happened, because 55 and 52, just numerically, they look pretty similar, especially from 7 stories up. So, there's a lot of things going on during a game, and I say, okay, this is Zadarius Smith making that move. I read 55 instead of 52 right off the first blush. It looked like Zadarius Smith. It looked like a Zadarius Smith pass rush to make that wicked inside move and get on Matthew Stafford as quick as he did. Rashawn Gary set up the interception, and we saw this more and more in camp. We saw him bringing that athleticism that he has in one-on-ones to 11-on-11 settings. The question was whether or not that was going to carry over into regular season. And I don't think he has a sack yet, but he's been a difference maker. Outside linebackers coach Mike Smith, if we know anything about him, it's that he does not care about sacks. He could not care less about the sack totals. It's impacting the game, having an influence and affecting the quarterback. Rashawn Gary is doing that more than what we ever saw last year. So, yeah, he made a game-changing play today and really set up 6 points for the defense.
Slowly growing, we're seeing a lot more from Rashawn Gary through 2 games than we saw in 2019. That's simply because he's had more opportunities to show himself and because of his hard work that he put in this offseason. We saw that very much so in training camp. Now it's translating to the regular season. Let's move over to Facebook to answer some of our questions from our lovely viewers. Let's go to Todd here. Todd asks, who is the Packers' first string tight end? Packers fans have heard a lot about tight end Jay Sternberger. However, he did not fare very well today. You're correct there. He had 2 pretty big drops. One of them was waved off after Lucas Patrick penalty. However, a drop nonetheless. Tight end Robert Tonyan also did well. If you look at the depth chart, it'll say tight end Mercedes Lewis is your first string tight end. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that Mercedes Lewis is getting the most snaps of all the tight ends. Based on their role in this offense, Ryan, who is the Packers' true first-string tight end?
Depends on the down. Mercedes Lewis in run situations, predominantly on first and second down. Robert Tonyan is the top receiving threat as a tight end. He had the 11-yard touchdown today, which, quick fact, it was the first time since the finale of 2016 It's the first time in 7 games that the Packers actually had a lead against the Lions in regulation. It had been a minute. Of course, they won 2 games last year, but that happens when it's the Lions. Robert Tonyan kind of got thrown open by Aaron Rodgers on that touchdown. It was kind of a trust throw. And Aaron Rodgers said after the game that there is a lot of confidence in Robert Tonyan. If he can stay healthy, he could have a good year for this offense, just because he's been in the offense long enough now, and you can see the familiarity that and the comfortability that he has in the scheme. So, it depends on the down. They're really versatile at that position. There's not one true George Kittle type stud, but they've got some guys that can do different things, and they're being employed the right way.
Matt LaFleur was very complimentary of Robert Tonyan and his adjustment on his route on that touchdown. All of those tight ends are critical to the Packers' success on offense. Thank you for your question. Let's take a question now from Rick. Rick asks, how is Davante Adams and center Corey Linsley doing? Both of them left the game early with injuries. Davante Adams sustained a hamstring injury in game. Corey Linsley, I believe it was a hand injury. Ryan,
yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
That's correct.
The two of them did not return to the game. However, at the moment, we don't have any additional information. I will note that Davante Adams never left the Packers bench throughout the entire game. He was out there on the sidelines, which means he wasn't being serviced by the medical staff during the game. Typically, that is good news. Anything else there to add, Ryan?
No.
Wonderful. Hopefully that
was succinct.
That's enough info for you there. Well, certainly as the week goes on and we start to learn a little bit more about what's going on, we will give you some more details. Thank you for your question. Let's take a question from Quicker Than Fast podcast. Love seeing the offense after some questions last year. How long, Ryan, is it going to take for the offense to look its best, its most complete, under head coach Matt LaFleur?
Looks pretty good right now. I mean, if this is not its top level, you shudder to think what it is. Look, if this continues, pity the defense has to go against this offense, because you take away one thing, they'll beat you with another. You take away that, they'll beat you with another. And oh, by the way, they've got a future Hall of Fame quarterback calling the shots at the line of scrimmage. So it's just a really good offense right now against, again, 2 bad defenses. I mean, that's really the next step in terms of validation, is when they go against a good defense. If they can do something like this, that's another level. Then you get the sense with this offense that they kind of feel like they've done what they should do. I mean, Aaron Rodgers said it today. This is a game they should win, and they did what they should do. That's a hallmark of a good team, doing what you should do, because a lot of times teams don't go out there and take care of business. This team did. Still, you got to see it against a good defense to really know, but they look really good.
This offense isn't only successful in terms of production. As Linda points out, it seems like blocking by all the players is a big difference maker for this team. And Linda, I would agree with you. It's not just the blocking from the offensive line or tight end Mercedes Lewis, who's known for blocking. It's blocking from all of the skill players, including a player like running back Aaron Jones, who talked about how much pride he takes in blocking and setting Marquez Valdes-Scantling up for that 41-yard reception. Why are the Packers, especially some of these skilled players, such willing blockers?
They preach it. I mean, they talk about it all the time, and you hear it occasionally elsewhere, but the last year and this year is probably the most that I've heard, especially from the receiving group, about blocking. And then you see what happens on the field, where you've got a running back who's blocking for a big play for a receiver. You've got receivers that are blocking for big plays for running backs. It is very much reciprocal, and it's doing your 1/11th and all those cliches, but when it clicks, that's what it looks like.
Certainly. Thank you for your wonderful, astute point there, Linda. Let's take a question here from Zach. Zach asks, what are the Packers going to do with the 2 open roster spots when Lane Taylor goes on IR? Funny enough, guard Lane Taylor has not gone on IR yet. However, it's anticipated that he will be after he sustained a season-ending knee injury. However, the Packers do have an open roster spot at the moment after wide receiver Equinemius St. Brown went on IR just the other day, also with a knee injury. Ryan, who is most likely to either get the call-up from the practice squad, or perhaps the Packers want to look elsewhere to fill that spot?
Yeah, we're still learning how these 2 shuttle the practice squad players to the 55 work. I think that it's going to be in large part a game-by-game basis. So just because we've seen John Lovett, for example, exercise his 2, doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to need that again. Josiah DeGuara was out today. They needed another fullback, right? With that said, John Lovett has exercised his 2 freebies, his 2 free elevations to the 55. For him to be active again on game day, they would have to sign him to the 53. So I would start there. John Lovett makes a lot of sense. They like John Lovett. They claimed him. He's been promoted 2 out of 2 times. So start there. And then I think that it very well might be situational. See how some of these injuries play out and what needs they need to fill in the roster.
As the week continues, we'll have more updates for you on the Packers' injuries, when or if Lane Taylor ever goes on IR, who they decide to fill those spots on the roster with. We'll keep you posted on PackersNews.com. Let's move over to Joan. Joan says, amazing game. Do we know how long defensive lineman Kenny Clark will be out? The Packers need him. The Packers would certainly like to have defensive lineman Kenny Clark back. He was out of today's game with a groin injury that he sustained in the game last week against the Minnesota Vikings. We don't know how long he is going to be back. However, what we do know is that he has not entirely disappeared off the face of the earth, at least at practice. He has been present on the sidelines doing rehab while the Packers are practicing, which is generally good news in terms of the length of how long Clark will be out. However, we do not know exactly how long that might be.
Yeah, it could be a couple weeks. It's one of those soft tissue injuries that they're always really careful to get a guy back to full go because it's not the first injury you have to be worried about with those soft tissue. It's the re-injury of the injury. That's when it becomes very serious. So they're going to take their time. His absence was felt today. There's no question. I don't know if you have the final run numbers, but it was not as shut down as it was week 1. There were some big runs today that the Lions had, and if you're looking for a weak spot on a really overwhelmingly positive day, it probably would be the interior defensive line play. So, as expected, without Kenny Clark, he's the anchor up front. He's the enforcer. The sooner the better, but they're not going to rush him back because similar to what they said with Billy Turner today, why he didn't play. I mean, he was active, but he didn't start today because Matt LaFleur said he just made a long-term decision that, hey, it's week 2. This is a marathon. They're going to be playing, hopefully, no COVID aside. They're going to be playing deep into December, January. You don't want to expose a guy like that in week 2. That's what they did with Billy Turner. They'll be the same way with Kenny Clark.
The defensive line and the defense as a whole was able to hold the Detroit Lions run game to just under 100 rushing yards. It felt like a lot of that came early on in the game when the Packers defense was struggling to get off the field quickly. Once they were able to build some momentum and play some complementary football during the game, they were able to shut down the Lions defense and the Lions run game a little bit more than they were early on in the game.
31 straight points as a way of taking out the run game. I mean, really, once the Packers jumped out to that 34-14 lead, they weren't running the ball. So, yeah, early on when it was a competitive game, they weren't really stopping the run.
Speaking of the Packers defense, Siraj says that the Packers defense stepped up in the second half of the game. However, it still needs to improve. Outside linebacker Preston Smith has been disappointing. Do we agree? Preston Smith has been tasked with something that outside linebacker Kyler Fackrell did quite a bit last season, which is dropping into coverage. How often did it seem like Smith was having to drop in the coverage instead of getting after the quarterback?
I'd have to see the film to know that, but the splash plays haven't been there. That doesn't mean he's playing poorly. Don't mistake the splash plays for poor play or even lack of production, because there are things that are not obvious that those guys are asked to do. Bottom line, I think the edge of this defense has been awfully good. And, it's like this is a different 2-0 than a year ago. They're 2-0 just like last year. The defense has kind of been the same. The defense wasn't really – I know that they played well against Mitch Trubisky in the opener last year, but they gave up some stuff week 2 against the Vikings. They weren't dominant. This hasn't been a dominant defense. What they were was opportunistic, and they made game-changing plays. That's what this defense did today with the pick 6. They did the safety week 1, right? So it's similar. The difference is the offense. So I don't know that the defense has really changed that much. Just it might not look as good because what the offense is doing is night and day different.
Well, they're 2-0 to start the season. Head coach Matt LaFleur, 8-0 against NFC North teams in his career. And that is going to do it for us today. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us. We will be back on Wednesday to start previewing the week ahead, as the Packers are going to be on the road in New Orleans. Get to go down south for a little bit, get a little bit of sun down south against Drew Brees and the Saints. Make sure you're checking out PackersNews.com for all of your Packers post-game coverage. Also, make sure you're following us on all of our social media platforms. We'll have lots of updates for you, especially as they relate to injuries throughout the week over there. For